This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. This week we're going to try something just a little bit different for those of you who are viewing this over on YouTube, and I'm going to be supplementing the regular podcast with this video. I know some people actually just listen to the videos, rather the podcast through YouTube, and I thought perhaps that I might just kind of engage a little bit more by offering some video then this week. I thought I would try this maybe for a couple of weeks and want to get some feedback from you guys to let me know whether or not that this is helpful. Do you enjoy it or not? Should I go back to the way that it was? Again, the way that it's been, that I've been uploading a lot of podcasts on YouTube just as audio only. But I can do this certainly with just because I'm recording some of these conversations over Skype, and so I can deliver it to you this way so that you can actually see the interaction we're having back and forth between myself and the guest for this each episode. Anyhow, I don't know what to do until I hear back from you. So I implore you, please, to give me some feedback. Let me know what you think. If you like this kind of a thing, if you want me to continue this when I can. Again, that I'm not recording everything on Skype. Sometimes when I'm recording episodes, even on Skype, they say I prefer this just to be audio, not video, because I don't look good, my hair's bad, or bad background lighting or whatever. But in some cases, they say yes. And so I can post this on YouTube, since YouTube is a visual medium. And podcasts typically, of course, are audio mediums, or media. So I wanted just to try something a little bit different. Want to hear what you have to say? Please leave a comment down below. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel here for Texas Magician. And I would appreciate that. And also that if you're not a friend of the Magic Word, be sure to join us. Go over to the magicwordpodcast.com, and there you will see, I believe, got a scroll over here that will tell you where to go. And if you will just go and visit our website there, you can learn how to become a friend of the Magic Word with your financial support, because it's because of the help people like you who are able to help us financially that we're able to continue this podcast in the different forms that we do, the way I produce this from week to week, and to help defray my costs for equipment and for domain and server computers and everything, hardware and software, etc. Enough of that. Anyhow, thank you guys very much for coming in and listening. This week we're going to be going to Las Vegas, where we're going to be talking with Tim Wise in his studio, actually. And I say his studio, it's actually kind of his workshop. And you can see behind him that he's got some of his equipment set up, where he's got his 3D printers going. And we're going to talk a little bit about that at the beginning of this podcast, as well as some other things. There are so many things that I could talk about with Tim, that even just sticking on one subject, whether it's going to be Jeff McBride's Wonderground, or his history in working with Stan Kramian, or just different things. He has so many stories about everything that we could spend an hour or more easily on any one of these things. And so I apologize, but it may seem as if that I almost interrupted him from time to kind of keep veering away from going down a rabbit hole, but actually to see if we can kind of keep a little bit on track to get to see a little bit more of the scope of what that Tim has to offer, because he's a very great guy, a lot of fun, and has a vast amount of knowledge, certainly in magic, and someone that I think that you should need to know a lot more intimately by watching this podcast and listening, that you'll be able to hear more about what Tim has to say and where he came from, and some advice that he has to say then as well. So again, I'm going to back out, but before I do, one last thing, I want to just quickly say that when you're at the website, that is themagicwordpodcast.com, please subscribe to our pod letter. It's a weekly pod letter. I call it a pod letter. It's a phrase I coined, that basically is a weekly newsletter that comes out on the same time, simultaneous with the podcast. So that's the way that you know who it is that's going to be on that week, who's going to be coming up next week, and some suggestions from the archives. Also, if we're running a contest, that it will give you some information then about the contests that we're running. And so this way I'll give you a link to go and sign up to register to enter the contest. A lot of stuff we always have going on, and I want to thank my guests for the many things that they do offer us from time to time. And so without telling you any more about what Tim had to say, I'm going to let you just hear it from his own mouth. So please welcome my guest this week, Mr. Tim Wise, here on The Magic Word. Today, I have with me a guest from Las Vegas, someone who has been working behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, actually, with a lot of people and a lot of places and a lot of things that he's been working on, or whether it's been with Jeff McBride and working at the Wonderground, or whether that it's been working with David Copperfield or Chris Angel, so many different people in the Las Vegas area. But besides that, having toured on the road then with Stan Kramian and Dennis Loomis, and also want to talk about Abbott's. There are so many things that I want to get into, and this is just going to be an enjoyable hour of fun conversation. So please welcome my friend all the way from Las Vegas, Mr. Tim Wise. Hey there, Tim. How are you doing?
Scott Wells, nice to see you, pal, and I'm doing just fine. Just fine. Good. Thanks for having me today. Excited.
I'm so glad to have you here then as well. You're in your workshop then, I see right now, and you got some 3D printers behind you over there. Now, do I understand you have 5 free, not one,
I got about six of them. 3D printing is such a fun experience, and then once you immerse yourself, now I'm creating and actually producing magic with them. But initially, I was just printing other people's stuff,
Yeah.
And so I got a few of them here now, for sure.
Wow. So the stuff that you are recording, rather that you're making over there, are things that are not just gimmicks, but they're actual like props and things, or what?
Well, all right. So when you get a 3D printer, unless you have an experience as a 3D modeler where you can actually create things virtually on your computer and then make that on your printer, it's different when you create your own things, right? Because then so when you first start out, though, if you have no experience, you basically go online, you find somebody else that's made something, and then you print it. And fun thing about it is that you can scale it up and down to different sizes, and you can kind of manipulate the files a little bit, but it's basically somebody else's stuff. And then as I've gone along here, and there's many great magicians in our business that are like Levent and Sean Begonia and Bill Cook, pardon me. These guys are, using it, especially Sean Begonia. He's one of the first guys that ever had a 3D printer. I mean, going back 10 years ago, and I think he paid over $10,000 or $15,000 for one of the first ones, and now you can do pretty much what he was doing back then on your desktop. So I started creating some stuff with it, and I'm very excited about my new product that's out, and I know you are the benefactor of one of them, and so it's been really cool. 3D printing is really awesome. I have a background in regular printing. I was a print broker and an account executive back in Ann Arbor in those days, about 15, 20 years ago, and now you can print something physical. It's just pretty cool.
I was just thinking about how that our technology is evolving, certainly, and thinking about Bob Kohler being one of the first people I knew who had a toaster. Oh, I forgot what you call that. But the kind of stuff that he was doing back then, it was so expensive to buy that now you can do easily with, a free software, even kind of a thing. It's amazing, what we can do with that. And yes, I remember Levent talking at Magic Live, giving a lecture about the stuff that he could make and the different, not just props, but also gimmicks and things you can design for yourself, and you can scan them and whatnot. Anyhow, so yeah.
Yeah, well, that was another thing. It was like when I was working with David Copperfield. It was one of the benefit of being in Las Vegas, and he needed help in the unboxing of a major magic collection that he had purchased years and years before. And one of my thoughts was, because that was when I first bought my first printer, and I said, if you could get a scanner to scan some of these props, for instance, that maybe these props could appear in museums without ever having to put the actual prop in a museum. So he could lend out a 3D print of a Okido prop, and it wouldn't be the original prop, but it would be a 3D printed version, and the audience would be able to, or the spectator, whoever's watching it and they're looking at it in the museum, could see it, but not actually have the actual prop there. And but those 3D scanners were like incredibly expensive, and they've come down in price now, and pretty much you can scan anything and with a little skill print it right back out.
Right. Well, speaking of Copperfield, I know that you had worked with him for a number of years then, and were you traveling with him on the road before that he was? Okay.
No, never really traveled with him. In fact, my relationship with David only became in the last couple of years when I was working with Jeff McBride. And what was really cool is, David is a massive collector of magic. I mean, he's probably got if not the largest magic collection in the world related to our industry. And a few years back, Jeff McBride and the Mystery School, a few of the students were fortunate enough to go over and go to the museum. David was inquiring, I think, talking to Jeff about tannins. And Jeff had worked at Tannins, or had a really good relationship at that time. I know he worked at Flossos for a while. And so one day Jeff said, you want to go over to Copperfields and go to the museum? And I was like, yeah, I'll be the first guy in front, Yeah. And David was at that time putting all these Okido props. I mean, the entire just incredible amount of stuff from Okido. And so we went and visited the first day, and then we went back a second time. And I was really proactive when I was there. I was helping him build shelves, and even though I was volunteering, I was wanting to help. I wanted to contribute. And then at one point he just walked up to me and he says, I need some help around here. You want to come work for me? And I went, sure, I did. I mean, it was like, what an honor. Yeah. And David's museum and his dedication to preserving it. Now, unfortunately, it's not open to the public yet. And maybe in the future, he'll do that. But what an honor. I mean, I can't tell you, opening up boxes of magic collections, and it was like Christmas every day going to work with David Copperfield. It
was stuff I'm sure people had sent him, plus things that he was buying or acquiring from different places around the world and whatnot. So,
well, this particular collection that he needed help unboxing was the Leslie Cole collection. Okay. And this was acquired, I believe he bought it now 25 years ago, and it was in storage. And he had over 100 boxes, or 1,000. I mean, it's 1,000 boxes that were, pretty big size, 2x3 or better. Stacks and stacks of newspapers from the 1780s. I mean, I can't tell you this collector. This was for Leslie Cole, was I believe, the head librarian at the Magic Circle for many, many years in England. And so and Leslie Cole was a collector of collections. So he himself had. Leslie Cole, when he was alive, he collected collections. So when they were up for sale, he'd buy them. And then David acquired Leslie Cole's collection, which was a collection of collections.
Huge, yeah. So was it just you or other people, I assume, who were unboxing and doing all this?
Well, it was actually Will Bradshaw was the first person that David brought on, and Will was over there. And then I was the second person that came in on this. Now, when we first couple days there, we were in this massive area in the museum that was open space with empty bookshelves, knowing that we were going to be unboxing thousands and thousands of books. And so we were just filling, and so that first day, first couple weeks, Mike Caveney was there, Bill Smith, myself, Jeff McBride, and what a hoot, right? Yeah. We're all eating pizza on the floor with David and, talking about this amazing thing that we were doing. And then, so there wasn't just me. I mean, it certainly wasn't just me. But I'm telling you, for a magician, especially because I've had tenure in the business, I've been in a long time, so I knew what I was unboxing.
Sure.
There was things I would open it up and I go, are you kidding? I have, for instance, Eddie Joseph. Okay, yeah. Eddie Joseph was very prolific, wrote a lot for Abbott's Magic, and put out a lot of manuscripts and stuff. And here was Eddie Joseph's personal notes. Just incredible. Autograph books from magicians that, went from Maskelyne all the way to Paul Daniels, for instance, and it's just amazing. I can't tell you, it's like I said, Christmas every day. I'd open boxes. One box I remember opening up, and there were 4 signed Houdini, the life memoirs of one of the Houdini books. I can't even remember which one it was. Yeah. But they were all autographed, and the value of those were, not in the thousands, but maybe in the 10,000s range. And wow. And they were just sitting in a box. So without divulging too much about the experience, I'm just going to tell you it was like Christmas every day.
Now, you mentioned that he does not have the library and the collection open, and I know he doesn't. It is a private tour only kind of a thing. I've never heard any plans for them to open this to the public, but have you ever heard him say that he
No, I
might?
haven't, but I can't
Okay.
imagine, I can't imagine this not being for the benefit someday. But I'm telling you, it's so the museum tour itself, I mean, there's just open shelves. Nothing's really
Right.
protected. So
Hmm.
you can't have the public just milling in there.
That's a
And
good point.
you can't have more than maybe two or three people. And honestly, because of the value of everything, you got to
Hmm.
keep an eye on everything. And that was, I think that's part of the reason why it can't be a public tour, because things would disappear literally.
Well, sure. Yeah. And he would trust the magicians because he knows most of us who are going to be coming in on the private tours, and knows that we're going to respect it and appreciate it and not going to take anything, because as you're walking through and you see those little things, may be certainly easy enough just to pick up a small thing and put it in your pocket but yeah, you're not going to, obviously, but I could see the public might do that. So you're
Yeah,
right. I
well,
see a
it's just
point.
this. It's just nothing's behind plexiglass. I mean,
Yeah.
if
Right.
everything was behind plexiglass, you'd have an area of comfort. But there's just
Sure.
so much. I mean, I don't even know how many thousands of square feet. I mean, but it's in the literally thousands of
Well,
square feet.
remember when I went through it that he was actually physically tripping over some things. There were so many things there, and he had said to one of his assistants, he said, "Tomorrow, can you do such and such with this and move this?" To kind of avoid that, because he's used to these tours and walking through the whole thing, then as well. So I know that he also has a plan, I guess, to build one room, huge room. It's going to be like a library just for books only, which
The
makes
library is
sense.
actually that's one of the things that the Leslie Cole collection was. I'm not going to say primarily books because there was a lot of stuff, but it was. I'm going to say it was primarily books, but it was all different subject matters, a
Mm,
circus and occult and other things, but
hmm.
primarily magic. And I was in charge of the periodicals at one point, and you wouldn't believe all the different periodicals over the history of the last 300 years that were put out. Mastheads of different names of magic. I mean, it's
Hmm.
in different languages. Uh, I just like my tail would wag every day. I had keys to the castle, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and I could go in any time. And so to go in there and to be able to just, what's your job today? Oh, open up another box of I don't know.
The mystery
So,
boxes. Yeah,
yep,
exactly.
mystery boxes,
Speaking of
exactly.
mysteries and Mystery School and Jeff McBride that you had mentioned earlier, I know that he has quite a collection of things, that a lot of stuff that he'd collected from when he was a youth, not necessarily new things that he's been acquiring, but he just has a lot of cool stuff of his own, I guess. Uh,
Yes. Wow, what an experience with McBride. And we're still creating together. It's really been great.
you've been
You
the
know,
first
don't,
person to be the MC at the Wonderground of his, right?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he created the Wonderground. Let's see, probably I'm trying to get the dates right here, but he had produced it at the Palace Station. And when you look about how hard Jeff McBride works as a performer and as just a master of what we do, he he had a show called Magic on the Edge, or Magic at the Edge, and it was at the Palace Station 6 nights a week, a full evening show, hour and a half or so program, and he did that 6 nights a week.
Hmm.
Well, in addition to that, he launched a show called The Wonderground, and that show was at the Palace Station, and it was in a separate space from his main show. And he went in and did that show twice a week, Fridays and Saturdays. So he had Wonderground Fridays and Saturdays, plus 6 nights a week with his full evening show.
Wow.
And he
That
did that every
he was
weekend.
doing?
Yeah, he was doing. Yeah, it was his own show, Magic at the Edge, and that was a 6 nights a week. And then 2 nights a week he was producing Wonderground, and he had great people there like Steve Dackery, just a lot of great guys, right back
Yeah.
from, and I was living in Tennessee at that point, working at Dollywood for Dave Talent at the Magic Shop, and had a little restaurant I owned there as well. And so I was working in Tennessee, and my friend AJ Olson, who created the Street of Cards broadcast, if anybody has those memories of the Street of Cards,
Hmm.
was basically a virtual live show that he would do, a little player and a chat room, and you could interact. And he took the Street of Cards program into the Wonderground. And so then I was in Tennessee, was able to watch twice a week. I was live in Las Vegas, technically,
Yeah.
Because the chat room created the interactivity. We were able to watch the performances and so on. And so that was so much fun. And then Jeff finished his show, and Wonderground basically went on a pause button. And in that time, when he put it on pause, I ended up moving out west here from Tennessee. I moved out to Needles, California, and took over a resort on the river as managers. And McBride, it was only about 100 miles from Vegas, which was really cool, right? So I only had to, like, if I wanted to be in Vegas, I could drive 100 miles, spend a couple hours, do whatever, come back. It kind of had the best of both worlds, living in the country, in the desert. And then one day, McBride, I used to come to Darwin's Magic Club. That's what I would drive up every week. Every Wednesday, like clockwork, would go up to Darwin's. But then one day, McBride announced that he was bringing Wonderground back. And so my partner Rosie and I said, well, we'll go up and see the show, because we were in Tennessee watching it. Like, can't wait to see the show in person. And so he moved it to this little place called the Olive, a little hookah lounge right off the strip, about 4 miles. And I went to the first one, and I wanted to contribute. Even though I was there, I wanted to contribute. So I offered to take photographs, and because I'm a photographer. And so he says, yeah, go ahead, take pictures, have a good time. So at the end of that night, Jeff come up to me and he said, hey, I understand you have a resort down in Needles. And I went, yeah, we do. We have a nice place on the river. And he says, well, Abby and I only take 2 vacations a year, and we'd like to come down and spend the holiday with you. And it was around this time of the year, Christmas time. And so I looked at my partner, Rosie. I said, let's get him a nice space. And so he came down, and those 3 days really changed my life in a big way. This is before Wonderground or anything. I hadn't done anything with that yet, only that first one. And when I went there, and he goes, there's probably a reason I'm in your life. And why are you living in Needles, of all places? I said, well, I want to be closer to the magic scene in Vegas. And he says, well, you're in the magic scene. Now what do you want to do? and I said, okay. And then he offered me a week master class there. And I said, well, how am I going to pay for that? And he says, well, I work on a thing called the fee exchange, the fair energy exchange. And perhaps you can help me at Wonderground, and we'll work it out. And then that third day he's with me. He says, how would you like to be my stage manager for the Wonderground show? And I went, I'm in, right? So I've actually done more Wondergrounds than Jeff. As he's traveled around the country and the world, he'd have to leave, and I was left in charge. And so I think we've done over 120 of them, in the 10 years. And that's
because they're monthly, right?
Yeah, once a month, every third Thursday of the month. And we've had such great people on our stage. I mean, really, I've introduced and performed with so many great names. And then, that 10 years in Vegas with Jeff and being associated with the Mystery School, that's opened up vistas for other things. Like David Copperfield, I just mentioned, was because of Jeff's association with David. And now I have a nice relationship with him. And Siegfried and Roy, there's a great story around the genie that I created, the character, but Jeff was the impetus for that. Real quick.
Tell me about that. What was the genie?
Yeah. Well, doing Wonderground, I was the host, right? And so we'd have one of the greatest things in the dynamic of the McBride Wonderground show is that we'd have body painters and tarot readers and go-go dancers and other things happening.
A lot of variety.
In the space. And so, like, the body painters would be painting, or the canvas painters too. We had Aria used to come in and paint on the canvas, but they would start the night, and then through the night they would create their piece. And so by the end of the night, the body painter had somebody completely painted, or a couple of people. The canvas painter had their piece done, and they could show it up in front of the audience. So the body painter was named Suzanne Logano, one of the top body painters in the country. She comes up to me and she goes, I'm producing a show called the Bad Fairy Ball. And she wanted me to host it. And I said, well, all right, I'd be happy to host it. So every month before the show, it was like 6 months ahead of time, every month, you're still going to do the show, right, Tim? I said, yeah, of course, Suzanne. So it's the day of the show. And I'm over at Jeff's house. And he goes, oh, you're doing that show with Suzanne tonight. And I said, yeah, it's tonight. I can't wait. You know, it's a few hours from now, and I can't wait. He says, well, what are you going to wear? And I said, well, probably my suit.
Yeah.
And he goes, dude, you cannot wear a suit to a fairy ball. I said, all right, well, I'm limited on my costuming. And this is like when I first started working with Jeff, right? So,
Yeah.
So he says nothing else. Scott, he says nothing else. And we're just moving stuff in his garage. And then at one point he says, hey, Tim, will you do me a favor? I said, sure, what? And he says, here's $50. Would you run up to the dry cleaner and pick up some of my costuming? So innocently, I took the $50, drove over to the dry cleaner. I'm here to get something for Mr. McBride. And this woman brings back a turban and a massive sequined robe. Beautiful. And I picked it up, brought it back to Jeff. I go, here you go, Jeff. He goes, put it on. I went, what? And he says, put it on. And then he went to this little costume cabinet that he had in his garage, and he had threw me a pair of baggy pants, kind of like pantalone pants, you know,
Yeah,
and
sure.
And a organ grinder shirt, you know, kind of a open white frilly thing.
Yeah.
And so I put that on. I put this amazing robe on, and this robe was from Caesar's Magical Empire.
Oh, okay.
So it was a costume that was made for the Las Vegas shows, you know, Caesar's Magical Empire. And it was just sequined, and it was a genie. It had big, broad shoulders and velvet. And so here I am, put this robe on, and then this turban was like, it had big feathers and a big mirror with gems around the center of above my eye. And so I put the turban on, and I put the robe on, and I'm now looking to find a mirror. And he's always, Jeff, if you ever worked with him, he's always got a little makeup mirror, just a small one on the wall somewhere. And in his garage, he had a small little mirror. So here I am in this massive costume, trying to size myself up in the mirror. I'm looking up and down, trying to see myself. And then at one point, Jeff's head pops over my shoulder. And so I'm looking at him in the mirror.
Yeah.
And he says, that's what you wear to a fairy ball. And it was the most majestic costume ever.
Couldn't have been better.
So, yeah. And so then I was like, well, I'm going to be a genie tonight for all these people at the Bad Fairy Ball. I better, you know, have something to do or say, like give away some scrolls. I was thinking, what do I do? Do I give away scrolls, little sayings about the genie, what the genie might give you as a memento as you. And so we created some gift magic ideas where I would give away some gemstones. And Abby McBride also had these things called wish bubbles, where you blow bubbles and then pluck out a crystal out of the air from the bubble, right? So I did the show, and what an honor. Jeff decided to come and actually be in the audience and watch the show. And after the show, he says, great job, and you should take out this genie out on Fremont Street and do magic on the street as the genie. Cow.
Yeah.
And I went, all right. So the next day, I went out with a pocket full of crystals and hit Fremont Street. And this is way before Fremont Street was regulated for street performers. I basically had a free run as the genie, and I would walk from one end of Fremont to the other every night. And that first night, I went out. I was a photo op. A lot of people wanted to have their photos with me, and so I would take pictures, and it was so much fun because I was in the creation mode of the character. Like, what does his voice sound like? How does he behave? What does he say? So working the street that night, and there was a guy. And this is where Jeff McBride's thing of you have to be in the marketplace in order to have things happen. If you're not in the marketplace, then nothing happens, right? So I'm out there and I'm walking up and down the street, and I noticed this guy was following me, and he had a little little handset microphone on his lapel or on his shoulder, and I always thought that he was the security guard. Right? It's like, and the security was following me.
Right.
So every time I got him out of the corner of my eye, I would like try to get 10 or 15 steps ahead of him so I wouldn't have to interact with him. Well, at the end of the night, it was probably about 2 a.m. I'm standing down there at Main Street and Fremont, right near the plaza. And this guy walks up and he catches up to me and he goes, and he first of all, he walks up to me and I just keep an eye on him, and then he starts like eyeballing me up and down on my costume. And then he goes, so what's this get up here, you know? And I said, and I was really working out my whole routine. So I just said, I am the genie of good luck. And it's good luck to be standing next to the genie. And he goes, well, that's great. Well, my name's Adam Wright from MTV. And we're doing a show at the Hard Rock Hotel on the penthouse suite in a couple days. And we think you would be awesome to be a part of it. And I say, are you willing? And I went, yeah, sure, why not? So 2 days later, after that first night, being the genie on Fremont Street, I'm at the penthouse suite with hundreds of people, filmed for MTV, and I made an episode of MTV in the first 2 days. And
wow.
So then the genie kind of became kind of a staple on Fremont Street, if you will. I was working quite a bit. I made my living out there for quite a while. And then I got a call from Paul Stone, producer in England and United States. He's done a lot of great work. And he goes, it was about 8 years ago, just before Christmas. And he says, Tim, I'm performing with Siegfried and Roy. I'm going over to the Sunrise Hospital to do some magic for the kids. Would you like to come along? And I went, sure. Are you kidding me? To be Siegfried and Roy? So he says, and if you know any other magicians, let me know. And so I thought about it. I said, I don't know any other magicians that I could recommend, only because if they messed up, I'd be responsible for bringing them. So I never mentioned anybody else. And Paul was going to do some magic. And so the day, it was Christmas Eve, and we're going to meet over at the hospital about 1 o'clock, noon or something. And about 9:30 in the morning, I'm going, you know what? Siegfried and Roy, as I said to myself, I said, Siegfried and Roy hasn't been on the stage for almost 8 or 9 years at that point. And I said, these young children at the hospital are not going to know Siegfried and Roy.
Who they were, right.
And then I realized that they're not going to know me in a suit, and they're certainly not going to know Paul in a suit. And so I called Paul and I said, listen, I've been thinking about this, and they're not going to know Siegfried and Roy. They're not going to know you or I. Would it be okay for me to bring the genie along? And he goes, well, I don't know about that, Tim. Let me call Lynette. So he called Lynette, and Lynette got back and says, well, as long as he doesn't frighten the children with the genie costume. So I brought the genie costume, and we got to the hospital. We went up to the ward up on the 3rd or 4th floor there, and I wasn't even really sure how we were going to perform. Were we going to perform for all the children at once, or were we going to go room to room? And so there was kind of a question about how the day was going to go. And then Paul got there, and then Siegfried got there, and he saw me in my costume and gives me the once over, with his eyes. And then we realized that Paul was going to do something with a balloon, like latex balloons, and the nurses said, nope, no latex.
Right.
And so then it was just me and Siegfried and Roy. And we went in, it was room to room, and we went into the first room, and I remember I had brought a few effects to do, right? I didn't know what to do, so I brought a few things to do, and the first effect, I just didn't really go as well as I wanted. So when we came out of the room, I realized that I was just going to do my gifting of the gemstone, and it's basically where the child and I engage them to talk about wishes or dreams. And then I have them focus on a wish or dream, and then I make a crystal materialize in association with that wish or dream, so it kind of cements it with the child. So there's a great photo of with me, with Roy in the background, and me over a child who's hooked up to monitors, and his hands are outstretched, and he's holding the gem, and my hands are big and wide. Right. And this child's his smile is as big as pizza pans, his eyes are big and his smile is huge, like a Cheshire cat. And, what an honor. And had I not thought about bringing the genie, it would never have been the same.
Wow.
So then the next year they had me come and do the Boys and Girls Club as the genie. And what an honor, right? To do that with them and have it go so well.
But you were just at the right place, the right time, and kind of encouraged to do that then as well, to develop that character and to be in the position where that you can do this over and over, and of course being on the street like that then as well. I want to go back for just a minute then also prior to that, because I want to talk about Dennis Loomis and Stan Kramian. I often get the two kind of confused. I know we're going completely out of sync over here, but both those names kind of seems similar to me. I think it was Stan Kramian who had the magic capades, like magic on ice. Wasn't that kind of, was that the guy? Yes.
That's right. Stan Kramian, great showman, right? Of the day, one of the great showmen, traveling showman. And Stan was a creator of shows. And so he had I believe it was the how many shows did he did? The Mad World of Magic, Magic Capades. He had another one called, I think, Magic Kazam.
And he would sell these shows off like at the end after he's finished and then start all over from scratch, basically.
That's right. Right. So, and now we're talking like 1977 is when I joined Dennis Loomis's show, and I was only 16. I went to Abbott's Magic Get Together, and Loomis was kind of a fixture there every year, Dennis Loomis. And one year he had made an announcement at the convention that he was looking for assistants for the Magic Capade show. Now, I just got my driver's license in June, and here it's August.
You said Loomis or Kramian?
Dennis Loomis. No, Loomis, not Kramian, Loomis, because Kramian, I never directly worked with Kramian except for doing some phone room work, where we're calling and selling tickets. Yeah. But I worked on stage with Loomis for over a year. We went to Alaska and that. But during that time at the Abbott's thing, Dennis kind of let it known that he was looking for assistance, and magic conventions are a really good place to pick up assistants if looking for people for work. So I went up to Dennis, and I lived in the same town that Dennis lived in Ann Arbor. And my mother had just moved there, and Hank Morehouse had a magic shop downtown in downtown Ann Arbor. Franz Harari and I were very young magicians that would visit that magic shop every day, pretty much. And so Dennis was at the convention. I saw him, and I said, "Hey, Mr. Loomis, my name is Tim Wise, and I understand you're looking for somebody, and I would love to talk to you about being an assistant on your show." And I said, "And I live in Ann Arbor." He says, "Well, I live in Ann Arbor too." And I said, "Yeah, I know. I'd love to meet you." So that's all that was said. So the rest of the convention, I was on fire, right? I was just like, "Oh my God, I got a chance to maybe do, this." And so when I went home after the convention, now mind you, I'm supposed to go back to high school, and so I get home to my mom's apartment, and I walk in the door, and the first thing I say is, "Mom, I'm home, and I'm going on the road."
Yeah, how'd that go?
And all I heard from upstairs was, "What? Wait a minute," and she came down, and when she came downstairs, I go, "Mom, there's this magician. He wants to meet me. His name is Dennis Loomis. He's got a show," and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, "You got to go back to high school." And I said, "Mom, just let me have a chance to talk to him, And she goes, "All right, well, I'll give you a chance to talk to him." So I met Dennis at the Cottage Inn Pizza right below Hank Morehouse's magic shop on William Street in Ann Arbor. And so I'm sitting there with Dennis, and mind you, I'm 16. I'm just like green as a spring tomato. And he goes, told me all the responsibilities of the show: drive a truck, do 2 shows a day, build the illusions, take them down, put them in a truck, drive, take care of the animals, clean the costumes. He was trying to, and I just kept going, "Yeah, I can do that. Sure. Yeah. Okay." And so at the end of the interview, he goes, "All right, kid, you got the job." And I went, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah." And then he goes, "Oh, by the way, how old are you?" And I said, "I'm 16. I just got my driver's license." And he just looks at me and shrugged, like his shoulders dropped a little bit, and he just started shaking his head no. And he says, "I'm sorry." I said, "My attorneys would never let me take you on the road. You're too young." And
right. So
I'm sitting across, and I remember this, like I just said, "Well, before you say no, would you talk to my mom?" And he looked at me kind of funny, and he says, "Okay." So I went home, and I said, "Mom, he wants to hire me, but he wants to talk to you."
Okay.
So I arranged for them, or they arranged to get together. And I remember my mom was a head of security at the University of Michigan on the dorms and such. And so they met in some dorm library on campus. And she didn't get off till 6 a.m. So I waited up that whole night for her to get home. And she walked in the door, and I go, "What did he say?" And she says, "Well, he's going to consider it, and he's going to tell you this Sunday at Harry Colstock's Corn Roast Magic meeting this Sunday." So then I was on the edge of my chair, right, to go to this magic club thing that we had. Harry Colstock was a great contributor to magic in Ann Arbor, older gentleman. And so I get to the Corn Roast, and I'm waiting, and every time the door opened, I'm thinking it's Loomis is going to walk through the door, and nothing. He never showed up. And so I just basically didn't think I had the job. And so that was on a Sunday. So Monday happened, nothing. Tuesday, Wednesday, I remember being in my mom's apartment. I had my stereo on 10 listening to My Sharona. And I was bopping around my mom's apartment, just bouncing up and down. All of a sudden, the phone on the wall rings, right? So I went over to the stereo, turned it down, and I answered the phone. I go, hello? And he goes, Tim? And I go, yeah. This is Dennis Loomis calling. I said, yes, Dennis? He says, you still want the job, kid? I went, yeah. And he says, well, great, because rehearsals start at Tappan Junior High School at 8 o'clock this Friday. And we'll see you there. And Tappan Junior High School is a little junior high school in Ann Arbor. So I showed up on time. And I remember it like, yeah, I mean, it's 40-something years ago. I remember it like yesterday. We rehearsed for a solid week. And then we had 2 shows on a Friday the following week and 2 shows on Saturday. And then the next shows were a week later in Spokane, Washington. So, and that started my touring career with Dennis Loomis. And,
and quit high school right then? Your mom was cool with that?
Yeah, she allowed me to leave school. And I really didn't announce to anybody I was leaving school. I never told the school I was leaving. I just went on the road. And that first 4 months till December was amazing. I went, we started our shows out in Spokane, Washington, and then we were all over up and down the West Coast, Idaho, Oregon, California. Just amazing experience. And then Christmas came, and I still had the opportunity to stay or go, because I had a couple weeks off. And I said, no, I'm going back out. And so in January, we went back out. We started in L.A., and then in June, we got news that Dennis wanted to take the show to Alaska. So we drove the Alcan Highway all the way up to Alaska, did the Inland Channel, Haines, Skagway, all the little towns on a ferry boat. We did the shows with a semi-truck. And
wow.
Just amazing. So by the time I was 17, I had traveled almost 60,000 miles. We did over 100 cities. And that really, really cemented my belief that this is what I wanted to do for a living. Even though I'd done many other things since then, it was the impetus for showing me that I could have whatever I wanted.
Was there something that you were doing for Dennis at the time that you enjoyed more than others? In other words, were you on stage as an assistant from time to time, or did you like actually building and repairing?
No, I was an on-stage male assistant. I got cut in half every show with a PT Selbit sawing. And that was Stan Kramian's. And it's really great because there's a photograph of me 2 years before that when Kramian was performing at Abbott's and he needed some assistance to come up on stage. And there I am on stage helping with the Selbit sawing 2 years before I was going to be in that box. So I found those photos and I go, oh my God, this was 2 years before I was on the road with Loomis. And that's the same illusion that I was put in every night for a year.
Wow.
Kind of fun. So the onstage performing was always that's the fruit of, we had to drive. There's sometimes, 300-400 miles between shows and we have just one night to get there. And, a lot of truck stop diner food and late night, overnight drives and, a lot of, that's the work, right? That's the business of show business. And then the show is that 1 hour, hour and a half on stage that we get to perform.
Well, the booking of his shows, you were talking about Stan Kramian having the phone room kind of a thing. Was that the same kind of shows that Dennis did?
Yeah, back in the days, it was called boiler room operations.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, and
I worked a few of those myself.
Yeah, and those were.
You never know how many people are going to show up.
Yeah, you sell tickets over the phone,
right.
And you get a local sponsor to kind of sponsor the show. You have an advance guy on the road. So Magicapades had a couple advance promoters that would go into a town, and back in those days, it was very, very. I mean, a guy would go in, like, let's say if I was the promoter, I would arrive into Needles, California, rent a hotel room, have the phone company come in and put 2 or 3 phones in the room. I would be there for a month. I would hammer the phones and go through the phone book all day, every day, to every business saying, hey, the Magicapade show's coming into town and we're looking you to sponsor a book of tickets. And the tickets are only $2. Get 10 tickets for $20. How can can we send somebody out to give you your tickets? And that's how it was. We would that's how the shows were done in those days, the road shows anyway. Then the laws came in where you can't solicit without all the phone being prohibited now. But back in those days, it was phone rooms in every town. And there was times where we would arrive in a town. Let's say we had 2 weeks off and we'd get to the town early. They would put me to work in the phone rooms. And and I worked with some of the best phone guys back in those days. I mean, these guys that could smoke a cigarette and the ash would never fall off the cigarette. It would be stuck to his lip. I remember a guy named Jerry Kay that was just, yeah. And he would always have this like cigarette dangling from his lip and the ash would never fall off of it. It was hilarious. But
we'll talk about that. I remember I did an episode with my friend Daniel Summers, and Dan had done a lot of phone room shows himself. And he said that he was very successful and that he had, I don't know what the secret was. He said, but I have something that I do that assures success. And so he was doing these very well. And then as you said, the laws tightened each year, got worse and worse to the point it's like completely out of business. And that's like buggy whips now.
Yep. Yeah. But that, I can talk about it now. I mean, it's part of my history. That's no longer something that can be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And so that came after the Dennis Loomis thing that you met with Stan.
Yeah. Well, no, it's funny because it's at the same time. So, okay, Abbott's Magic Get Together, and I think it was 1977 or 76, actually. Stan Kramian sold Magicapades to Dennis Loomis, and there was a passing of a ceremonial pipe on stage. And I heard that there was some illicit substances in the pipe, but I didn't know this at the time. But they had this ritual where Kramian passed the mantle to Loomis.
Yeah.
So then that was the 76. So in 77, Loomis had already toured it for a year, and then he brought it to Abbott's again. He was back at Abbott's, and that's when he kind of announced that he was looking for assistance. And so that was the year that I got hired. Now, when we went out west, we were in Washington State. Kramian's from Vancouver area. And so Magicapades and whatever show Stan was doing at the time was also crossing paths. So, like, if we were close enough, we would go watch Stan's show. Or if they, or vice versa, they would come down and watch our show.
Right.
And so there was just a couple times in that year where I was participating in the phone room work with Stan. So that's when I met Stan Kramian, and actually worked with them to sell tickets. And then there's a magician a couple years later, and I'm 18, 19 now. A couple years later, I got married when I was 19. And I was looking for work, and Mark Evans, a magician out of Salt Lake City, had a show, one of Kramian's shows called The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Magic. And so I went and took my new bride and moved out to Salt Lake City and was working the phone rooms for them. And that lasted for a little while. It wasn't a long-term thing. I moved back to Michigan and ended up doing my own shows. I actually was doing phone room. I found a local sponsor in my own town, Ypsilanti, Michigan, got the recreation center to be the sponsor and rented a theater. I mean, so my first phone room shows that I produced were based on the history of working for them. And when I was 19, 18, 19, producing shows. So much fun, you're bringing back. When we talk about it, certainly the memories are flooding in. So this is really fun.
Quite an arc then from then till now. There was something you and I were talking about on the phone the other day, and I want to circle back to. That was some advice that you were giving, and you know what I'm talking about? The story.
Yeah. Well, what is your life worth? That one.
That was the one. Yes.
Yeah.
About the story of.
Yeah. So I'll be happy to share the story with the audience here. And it was very significant. I needed, things come to you when you need it. When your ears are open, you can hear it when maybe 10 minutes before you weren't open to it.
Which kind of leads into the story from everything that you've been saying about how that you were listening to what Jeff was suggesting, and this is for you. You need to have the genie, about how that led into this, and the same thing that you were working with Dennis Loomis, and one thing led to another, and so you just had to be open to that, and so that kind of leads into the story. That's why I wanted to.
Yeah, open to the possibilities. It's all So in this world, there's a lot of fear, right? And when I learned young, hey mom, there's this magician. I was 16. Okay, so this is very important for parents. If you're listening and you have children that are interested in something that they really want to do, because I have 2 children now, and I always, encourage them to be themselves. Is that, in that time, my mom could have said, "No, you're going back to school." That's it, right? And then the trajectory of my life would have been completely different.
We may not have been having this conversation.
Yep, wouldn't be. And my mom was pretty liberal. And, she basically said, "I see you, be you. I see you, go be you." And, she used to take, 1977, let her kid leave high school, go on the road. I certainly wouldn't have done it myself,
It's quite a hippie thing to say. She was a lady of the 60s, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. Born in 42 and was, through the 60s, she was in her mid 20s. And, so what an opportunity. See, my mom saw something that she saw my passion for magic. I was really passionate about it, even at that age. So, just said, go. So one of the things I talk about when I perform at the Magic Castle, there's like 4 things that I even tell my audience. Is like there's 4 little principles that I have, and one of them is to love yourself first. Okay, love yourself first, and then the second thing is to not be attached to the outcome of anything. Don't be attached to an outcome. So those 2 things kind of work together, because it's hard to not be attached to an outcome, but you got to love yourself first. And sometimes if you get attached, you're not loving yourself in that moment. The third thing is that there is no emergency in life. That we kind of are in our culture, we're in this emergency mode all the time. Like, someone might cut you off on the highway because they're in a hurry to get somewhere. It's like it's an emergency, and they're only going to their dentist appointment, which could be late. But yet people create emergency when really it's not an emergency. Your hair's on fire, that's an emergency, but the rest of the life is like, so there is no emergency. And I think our culture really confuses urgency with emergency.
Good point.
And so, so that's a third thing that I pay attention to. And then the last thing is to say yes as much as possible, but not to your detriment. Like, there's a bottle of liquor there, I'm going to have a couple shots, not the whole bottle. That would be to my detriment. Yes to a little, but not, so always having this gauge of saying yes. So then the story that I'm going to tell you here is, when I heard this story, I made some major changes in my life. And it's a story about a little Indian boy who asks his father, "What is my life worth?" He says, "Father, what is my life worth?" And the father says, "Son, do you see that stone right there? I want you to take it to the market. And if anybody asks you if it's for sale, I don't want you to say a word. I want you to nod your head yes. And if they ask you how much, just hold up 2 fingers." So the little boy takes the stone to the market. He lays it on the ground. And a woman immediately walks up and says, "Little boy, I see you have a stone. Is it for sale?" The little boy nods his head yes. "How much for the stone, little boy?" says the woman. The little boy holds up 2 fingers. And she goes, "I'd gladly give you $2 for it." The little boy was surprised, and he ran back to his father and says, Father, she wants to give me $2 for the stone." The father says, "Now, son, I want you to take that stone to the city. And if anybody asks you if it's for sale, you just nod your head yes. And if they ask you how much, I want you to hold up 2 fingers." Little boy remembers what his dad says, grabs the stone, runs to the city, puts it down on the sidewalk, and a man in a suit walks up and says, "Little boy, I see you have a stone. Perhaps is it for sale?" The little boy nods his head yes. "How much for the stone, little boy?" He holds up 2 fingers, and the man in the suit says, "I'd gladly give you 200 for it." The boy was so surprised, ran back to his father, says, "Father, he'll give me 200 for the stone." The father then says, "Son, I want you to now take that stone to the rare gem dealer. And if he asks you if it's for sale, you just nod your head yes. And if he asks you how much, just hold up 2 fingers." The little boy knew the routine at this point. So he ran to the rare gem dealer. He walks through the door, and the man behind the counter, his eyes get as big as pizza pans. Says, "Little boy, I see you have a stone. Is it for sale?" Little boy nods his head yes. "How much for the stone, little boy?" He holds up 2 fingers. The man behind the counter says, "I'd gladly give you 200,000 for it." So the little boy runs back to his father and says, "Father, father, father, the man will give me 200,000 for the stone." And the father looks at his son and says, "Now do you see what your life is worth?" And the little boy was confused. And the father says, "Son, in life, you need to surround yourself with people who see your value."
Great story. Wow. Yeah.
And when I heard that, how many times in our lives have we been associated with, either in business and relationship, where people don't see your value,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so then you feel defeated, like nobody sees me for who I am. And so when I heard that story, I mean, I made some major, most people go, "Well, why did you do that?" I said, "Because I wasn't seen in the way I need to be seen."
Mm-hmm.
And so, people like McBride, who has for 11 years now, has seen my value, what I contributed to Wonderground, what I've done to the Mystery School, taking his advice and running with it, working at the Genie worked at getting back to the Genie works the Magic Castle twice a year for the kids. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
here's a persona that could have just sat on a hanger in his garage.
Yeah.
Right?
You brought it to life. Yeah.
And Paul Draper actually commented one time. He says, "Tim, McBride offered me that costume and I never took advantage of it. And you have now made something amazing out of it." And then that costume is in retirement now because I had a new one made that actually was for me. And one of the managers at the Magic Castle, Pat Payne, is a seamstress, and I approached her once. I said, "Do you take commission?" She said, "Yeah," because I saw some of the work that she'd done, and she made me this. I got about $3,000 in the costume, but it's fitted for me. It's got all the things where everything needs to be as far as the magic guy's concerned.
All the pockets and all. Yeah.
Yeah, and you wouldn't believe it. There's photos out there of me in this new costume. It's just great. So, what is your life worth? And that's a really good topic or a good question to ask yourself, because then you can start answering the question, why am I doing things? What is what's the why? We always go when and how, but what's the why? And so that's kind of my purpose now, is to just kind of find the meaning in the why, right? Why am I doing this? And why am I associated with this person or not associated with this person, and so on and so forth. So, and a lot of great things have come from that.
Yeah. There was something else along with that story. I thought that you told me that when you were with some people and there was someone whose eyes got, like you said, big as pizza pans, and don't remember the rest of the story. You know what I'm talking about as we were chatting?
Well, I share this story now. This is a very important, significant in my life. So now I share that simple parable, with others. And specifically, I don't remember exactly who, but I know that because I share the story, if you're open to hearing it, or when you can hear it, you hear that, you hear the story and you
That's
go,
right.
"Oh, that relates to me." I don't know exactly the exact reference that we're talking about, but I know that when I share the story, it does have significance. when it's heard. It's just people are willing to hear it.
Right. Well, in that regard, as we start to wrap up over here then too, is that the name of my podcast is called The Magic Word. And so I always like to know what my guests have as their philosophy of life. And that kind of sums it up what you said there. And so is there something that gives you joy, something that gives your life meaning to wake up for? What is, not to say a word, but it could be a phrase.
Another great parable. Don't be attached to the outcome, really, because you don't know. The future, whatever is coming, you don't know exactly. The universe is going to deliver what it's going to deliver. And then I believe that everything is divine in our lives. If we look back, it seems like it should have happened, right? If we look back, our lives sometimes are like a movie, like it's supposed to play out. But everything is divine. You just might not like it very much, sometimes things are delivered and you don't like them, but one of the other parables that I love, there's two of them that I love to tell, and it's just the farmer who had a prize horse, and the horse runs off and leaves the farm, and the neighbor comes up over the fence and says, "Oh, I saw that your prize horse ran away." And the farmer says, "Yeah, well, who's to say what's good or bad?" And then the next day, the horse returns to the farm with 100 wild prize horses in tow. And the neighbor comes up to the fence and goes, "Oh my goodness, what good fortune. Your horse has returned with all of these wonderful horses." And the farmer says, "Yeah, but who's to say what's good or bad?" Then the next day, the farmer's son is training one of the wild horses and is thrown from the horse, and he breaks his leg. And the neighbor comes to the fence and says, "Oh, what a terrible thing to happen. Your son broke his leg." And the farmer's response was, "Well, who's to say what's good or bad?" And the very next day, the army comes through the village and takes and recruits all of the young boys. And the farmer's son was spared being recruited. And the neighbor comes to the fence and says, "Oh, isn't it great that your son wasn't taken?" And the farmer says, "Who's to say what's good or bad?" And the story goes on and on and on and on. Right. So my philosophy is to love yourself first. Don't be attached to the outcome. There is no emergency, and to say yes as much as possible, but not to your detriment.
That's great. Good advice. Tim, thanks very much. Appreciate your time here today. It's always good chatting with you and getting to deepen our friendship. This has been great.
Well, I can't believe an hour went by in a blink. So thanks a lot.
I knew that it would.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me.
You bet. Thank you. For the Magic Word Podcast, then. That was Tim Wise. This is Scotty out. Well, that was great, Tim. Thank you very much. I appreciate your help in being a guest on this week's podcast. It's always just a joy to me to have an opportunity to sit and chat with you. And I'm glad we got to see a little bit of your workshop back over there then, too, and learn a little bit more then about you. So, again, I just want to thank everybody for watching this on YouTube, and I would like to have your feedback. It's important that I know whether or not this is something that is engaging. You want to see more of it, less of it? Should I go back to just the audio only that I upload over onto YouTube, or continue occasionally with these kinds of video supplements, if you will? So let me hear from you. And so until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember, don't be too attached to the outcome. Just kind of let it happen, and it will. This is Scotty out.